Hi, welcome to this course where I'm going to try and teach Fusion 360 in under an hour. Now you're not going to know all the software, we've only got an hour, but you are going to know the basic modelling techniques. You're going to be able to navigate your way around the interface. You're going to be confident enough with Fusion that you can then start clicking other buttons, seeing what they do. If you're the type of person that just likes to be shown how the basics of something works and then go off and learn the rest yourself, this course may be all you need, okay? You're not going to be able to create models like this after just doing this course, but it is going to give you a good foundation to then go on and decide, depending on what type of modeling you want to do, where you need to go next. So I hope you get something out of it. We're going to go through it fairly quickly to get it done in under an hour. I hope you like it. If you do, please like and subscribe, leave a comment, let us know how you get on, and let's get started. Okay, so let's get started. Again, we're going to move quite quickly through this. I've got here the screen that will greet you when you first open Fusion. So you might already have it, you might have played about it a bit, but I want us all to start from the same basic point. So let's pretend we've all just installed Fusion and this is what you're presented with. Okay, the only thing you might have differently is, let's see, you might have this data panel here and yours will look different. This is basically a list of all the projects you've done so far. If you've just installed it, you're not going to have any projects you've done so far. So you might just have kind of things like this. It might look a bit different. Either way, you're going to have this with your name and the projects there. And all I want to do with this in this course is close it, okay? It doesn't matter to us at the moment. So we're now going to have this basic screen here. So we're just going to do a very quick overview of what it's all about. So here we have this list and it will go down right to the bottom. There's kind of a partition in the screen here that you can't see, but this is your browser. And all this is, it's like your file explorer on Windows or whatever you call it on Mac. It's just a list of your files, your folders, how you organize your project. Again, starting a new project, it's going to be just this because there's nothing there yet. The only thing you're going to do really in here is under document settings. For this specific document, you can set your units, okay? So if you click on this kind of edit, then you can change your units. What do you want to draw in? This course is all going to be in millimeters, but if you want to work in inches, it's up to you. Generally, in Fusion, you're doing kind of smaller stuff, so you don't tend to work in meters or feet much, but it depends what you're working on. This course, we're going to do it in millimeters, but the principles will all be the same whatever you're working in, okay? So to follow along, just set that to millimeters if it isn't already. And then click OK if you've changed it, and it should say millimeters there, okay? And you can just collapse that. The others don't need to worry about. You might not see in the center of the screen the origin. If that, you see that picture of an eye, that's your visibility. So if that's turned off, and this goes for anything in Fusion, this means visibility, this little picture of an eye. And if it's grayed out with a cross through it, then it's off. If it's showing, then it's on. And that is your origin here. So the origin we'll go through in a minute, but that's how you turn it on and off. And you can expand that. The origin has different parts that make it up, but again, we'll look at that later. So along the top, we have your basic tools, things you can create. We'll look at those. That's basically the functions within Fusion. Along the bottom here, you see this looks like a kind of video recording on your general controls that you would have on video recording software, things like that, play, skip, forward, wind. It's what's called the timeline. So in Fusion, you can go back, rather than having to undo things, you can actually go back in time. So let's say you've created an object and then an hour later, you realize you might need to change that. You did it a bit wrong. You don't need to undo. You can just go back in time to the point where you created that object, change it, and then go back forward in time, and it'll all update accordingly. So that's one of the beauties of this kind of software, this kind of parametric modeling. You can go back and you can change things retrospectively. But that's your controls. And what will happen as you start adding things here, this will build up, and you'll get all the history of everything you've done will start building up here. Now you can turn that on and off. if you go down to this kind of cogwheel here, you can select do not capture design history. And it will say all the history will be removed and operations will not be captured in the timeline. And you'll lose that. So if you've opened it up and it isn't actually showing, don't worry. It just means that's been turned off. So if you don't have that bar showing, if it looks like this, when you've opened Fusion, that means it was already turned off. And you can see you also don't have the option there like you had. But don't worry, to turn it on, all you do is just highlight document settings, right click, and you'll see at the bottom it says capture design history. So if you click that, it'll turn it on. Okay, so now let's look at our modeling workspace. That's this main area in the middle. This is where you're going to do all your work, all your modeling. And you can see you have these. If you make sure your origin is on, you should have these. You've got 3 yellow squares. These are called planes. And you've got these lines. These are called axes. And then you've got a point in the middle. Okay. So if you imagine, if we're drawing something, we need, because we're using coordinates to give it measurements, there must be a center of all those measurements. And so think of the origin as the center of the universe in this modeling area. And don't worry if that didn't make sense, it will. The thing with coordinates, the thing I've found, if you try and teach the theory of it at the start, it doesn't make sense to some people if they're not used to working with coordinates. But as you get used to just working, if you just demonstrate and you just start modeling, it would all become clear. So don't worry too much if you don't get it yet, but think of this point as the center of the universe. And if I highlight it, you'll see down here in the bottom right, it's the origin point. It's x0, y0, z0, okay? Now, if you look at these axes, you can see up here, this is called the view cube. The red one, it shows is x, and the blue one is z, okay? And you can't see it on this kind of view, but the green one is y. So that's x, that's y, that's z. So if I drew a square, for instance, which was x10, y10, that would mean it's 10 units, which we've set to millimeters. So 10 millimeters in this direction along the x-axis, 10 millimeters in that direction along the y-axis, okay? And then if you wanted to, that would be 2D, like a square. If you wanted it 3D, you'd go up in the z-axis as well. Again, if that's going over your head, don't worry, it will be very, very simple once we start modeling. I just want to explain what this is we're looking at. And then, obviously, each kind of, when you're in 2D, you've got these 3 planes. So in the x, y plane, you have this one. This one would be the YZ plane, and then this one would be the XZ plane, okay? And you can always kind of check what you've got here with X and Z. Now, one difference you might have is instead of Z here, yours might be showing X and Y, okay? And so we're all on the same page. I want us all to have Z at the top. If you go up to your name, it should be your name, maybe a picture, up there, and just left click it once, you'll see you get preferences. This is where you can change all the setup of your Fusion, okay? Lots and lots of options. Most of it won't make sense if you're new, but there's one here under general. You've got one default modeling orientation and it says Z up, and the other option is Y up, which you might have it set on. If yours looks like that, then you've got it set to Y up, okay? So just change it under preferences, general, default modeling, change to Z up, and click apply, and okay. You'll notice it probably doesn't change. It's because when you change the options, some of them will only change the next time you start a project. So all you do, go to the plus at the end of your tab, okay, go to the plus sign to create a new tab, and you'll see it makes it right, and you can just close the others. Yeah, don't worry about saving. Okay, and then turn your origin on, make sure you're in millimeters, make sure you've got the timeline, and we should all now look the same. Okay, so we've looked at the origin, we've looked at origin planes, we've looked at the timeline, we've seen this view cube, and we've seen how it can show where we are in terms of X, Y, Z, but we use this view cube also to move around our views. Okay, so The main way we navigate in Fusion, and hopefully you've all got a mouse with 3 buttons, so left, right button and a middle wheel button, which is what you need to follow along this course. If you wanted to move about, then you would hold down the middle wheel, and you'll see you get this hand, that's pan, and with it held down you can pan around, okay? And with your wheel you can also zoom in and out by scrolling your wheel. And then if you hold down the shift key on your keyboard and the middle wheel, you can spin around, okay? Now, if we let that go, you'll see we've it looks like we've messed up our view here. We can see whereabouts we are, but how do we get it back? We don't want to be kind of trying to get the correct view. Well, all we need to do is click on this view cube. If you want the top view, you click that, and then you can click these arrows to orientate that top view. And then if you wanted like a front view, now you can click on this arrow and it will go to the front. You can go to the left view, back to the front, to the right view, back to the front. And if you want that nice 3D view we had at the start, you can just click the corners like that. If you want a view kind of looking down on it from an angle, and this view cube gives you a good representation of where we are. So that's how we start, okay? You can also click that home icon, which takes you back to that starting point. So if you're all over, you can't remember exactly where you need to go, just click home, and there you go. So that is navigating our interface. Now you should all be able to move around, zoom in, zoom out, pan around, use the view cube, and have your settings right. With the zooming in, zooming out, because we haven't actually got any geometry on screen, it doesn't really mean anything yet, but that's how you do it. So that's just a brief overview of the interface, and we're now ready to start actually creating something. Okay, so let's actually start creating something now. So in Fusion, there's a few different ways of working, different ways of modeling. One way is used probably by most people at least 80% of the time. So that's the one we're going to concentrate on in this course. And it's a basic 3D kind of modeling. We do that using these toolbars up here. The other methods, surface modeling, that kind of thing, they're out of the scope of this course. This is a fast track course to get you started. I do mostly this basic kind of 3D modeling workflow I'm going to show you now, with the added tools you'll learn throughout this course, and that'll suit you well for most of the things you'll do. Certainly get you confident enough to start adding those other skills like surface modeling later on. So let's start creating something. The basic workflow we're going to look at and what we use is sketch, extrude. Okay, so you do a sketch, a 2D sketch, and then you do what's called an extrusion, which is kind of creating it in 3D. And the easiest way to do that is just to show you. I'm just going to do something very basic now. So if you go to create sketch up here, you can see this one. And now what it wants, in order to create a sketch, it needs a plane. So if you think you're going to have drawn something on a sheet of paper, where is that sheet of paper? And you've only got 3 options at the start because you've only got 3 planes, which is your origin planes. And we're going to do this in the kind of XY plane, which is this one. If you click that, you'll see it kind of moves the screen around, so you're looking at a nice top-down view of the XY plane. And I'm going to select now, it wants us to draw some geometry to start our object. So I'm going to select rectangle. Now you've got 2 different choices of rectangle. We'll look at those soon. I'm just going to select this one, which has a dot in the middle, and it's called center rectangle. Okay. And now things change a bit. It's asking us where to put this middle dot, where to start from. And I want to start from this origin point, 0, 0. And you'll see if you actually move your mouse nearby, things kind of highlight. It'll snap onto lines and things like that. And that's just Fusion's inbuilt intelligence thinking, do you want to start on this point, on this line? And that's great. We use that. It's a good thing to have. So we're going to go near the origin. You'll see you get a little blue box around the origin. We're going to left click once. And now as we move our mouse, it will drag out this rectangle shape. And you'll see we have 2 boxes there. One of them is highlighted in blue, and there's a dimension in millimeters that's changing as we drag this out, and that's the size that we're going to draw this. So I'm going to create this. I want it to be 100 by 50 millimeters. So you can see it's going to be 100 that way and 50 millimeters that way. And one of these boxes highlighted in blue, that's the current selection. So if you just type in 100, you'll see it puts it in the box. We get a padlock next to it, which means we've locked it at that size. And now we can't change the dimension in that direction because we've told it it's 100. We can only change this one. If you then press the tab key on your keyboard, which is the two arrows, opposing arrows, usually on the left above caps lock, it will switch to the other box where we can type in our 50. And now we've locked this in both kind of dimensions. So we've locked the size of this now. And you could go back and forth between them, but once you're ready, once you've set it, press enter. And you've now drawn a box, okay? And when we're in this kind of sketch environment, you'll notice when we selected sketch, our toolbar changed. Now we've got sketch tools. So Fusion's intelligent enough that whatever you're doing, it shows you the correct toolbar. We've still got our other tools up here. This is what we had at the beginning. But it moves us into this sketch area because it knows we need these tools to work in the sketch command. We're still in the sketch environment. We're still looking down on this. We're still doing sketches. We've got this sketch palette here, which has got some other tools we'll look at. But we're in the sketch environment now. Until we click Finish Sketch, we're going to remain in the sketch environment, okay? So we're happy now. We've drawn this 2D rectangle. We'll select Finish Sketch, and now we'll go back. We're in our solid modeling toolbar now. The sketch toolbar tools have gone. We're back to this home view, and we can see our rectangle we've drawn. Now we've not actually created any physical kind of modeling yet. We've just drawn a sketch. A sketch is, if you think of it as a drawing of what, it's kind of a skeleton of your 3D model. It's a drawing of what it's going to be. Okay, so we've got a sketch here of a rectangle, but it's not been made into anything yet. And in order to make that into a 3D model, we're going to go to this one, which is extrude. We'll left click that, and you'll see it highlights in blue. Now again, Fusion is being intelligent. It's saying, I know what you want to extrude. Because we've only got one sketch on there, one rectangle, it's choosing that, and in this case it's choosing correctly. If we had two rectangles, it might choose the wrong one. If we left click something else, it would choose that instead. If we left click in this rectangle now, you'll see it unselects it. So if you select something by accident, or Fusion has automatically selected it and it's not the correct thing, you just click inside it and it will deselect it. Clicking it again and it will select it. And you'll see you get the extrude dialog box. Anytime you open a tool up here, it brings up its own dialog box where you can set the options. Don't worry about them just yet. The only thing we need to do is, you see you get this arrow. If we left click and hold the button, we can pull this up and create our 3D geometry from the sketch. And you'll see this dimension here, which is a Z dimension, will change as we pull this up. Most of the time you'll want something exact in there, so I'm going to go with 75, type it in, press enter. Now we have physical geometry. Now we've created something in 3D. And we can do that, hold down Shift and middle wheel, and we can orbit around. We can have a good look at it. There we go. We can go back to the home view, and that's our model. And now you can play about with the zoom in and out with your middle wheel, scrolling it, and you can actually see what's going on, panning around, that kind of thing. But that's your first bit of geometry. But even though that's a basic rectangular sketch in a box, that process is something you'll use over and over again in Fusion. And let's say we wanted to do a smaller box on top of this. Well, it's the same process. We go to Sketch, but this time instead of choosing one of the origin planes, we choose a face of the box. You can choose any face. It doesn't have to be a plane. You can choose any face in Fusion. So we're doing a sketch, but if I just go to this view, we're sketching on top of this rectangle, okay? And I'm going to choose the center rectangle again. Now the center rectangle with the dot in the middle, as we just saw, you click where you want the center and you pull it out. If I just escape out of that, the other rectangle, the 2-point rectangle, if I left click there, now you're going from one corner to another. So it depends how you wanted to draw that. In this case, I'm going to use that 2-point rectangle and then left click in the origin, and you'll see if you highlight over the corner, Fusion's finding it's snapping to things it thinks you might be interested in. So again, it's going to snap to that corner. You see we get this blue square. If you click there, you'll get it exactly in that corner. And now we can finish sketch. Okay, go back to home view if it doesn't automatically. And we can extrude again. And let's go 25. And now you've made, it's still a simple shape, but it's not as simple as it was. We're adding to this shape and we're creating more geometry, and this is how you go about modeling in Fusion. If we do a sketch again, this time I'm going to do it on this face here. Okay, and this time I'm not going to do a rectangle, I'm going to do a circle, center circle. Now, without left clicking, if you just hover your mouse over, you'll get this blue square where it's snapping to the origin. But then, without clicking, just move your mouse up, you'll see it follows this, you get a green kind of dashed line. It's a bit hard to see, but you get a green dashed line. And what that's doing is it's following up from the midpoint at 90 degrees. So Fusion's always thinking it knows what you want to do. If you just have a play about, you can, don't do any clicking, just moving your mouse. You can hover over a corner, or you can hover, you'll get this triangle. So that is a corner. If it's a triangle, it's a midpoint. So you can hover over the midpoint of that line, for instance, and then just move your mouse to the right and you'll get this dashed blue line. It's guessing. And you can actually make it snap to the center of that sketch. Okay, so try that. Just go up from the midpoint there until you get a blue line from the midpoint here, or vice versa. Try it from the midpoint there until it snaps onto a center line. But you'll see your cursor kind of wants to snap into that middle point. When you're there, left click once, you'll now have the circle. And it's the same as when we drew our square, except with the circle you've only got one dimension, diameter. We're going to do this at 20. And I'm going to select OK. And then I'm going to finish sketch. So now we've drawn a circle on this face here. And again, we just click extrude. We select the circle. And you can pull it out. And you can see you can make this shape here. But I don't want that. What I want is, I want to pull this in. And I want to go, if we're going inwards, in this direction, you'll see it puts a minus sign in front of a dimension here. So that way would just, if we just typed in 50, it would give us 50. But if we type in minus 50, then it's going to do a cut. And you can also, you can see it changes here. Operation is now a cut. Whereas when it was 50, it's a join. So if we go minus 50 and select OK, by holding shift and middle wheel, you can see we've actually created a hole in there. Again, this shape is now starting to look more complex. But what if this hole, we didn't want it at 50, we decided actually I want this hole to go all the way through to the other side. Well, this is where the timeline comes in. Remember we spoke about everything we've done being down here. So you can see that now. We did a sketch of a rectangle, and if you click it, it's highlighted in blue. We extruded that. We did a sketch of another rectangle. We extruded that. We did a sketch of a circle. We extruded that. If I wanted to change the height of this rectangle, all I need to do is go back to the extrusion, right click, edit feature, and we get the original options. We did our 25 millimeters. I'm going to change this to 35 millimeters, and it's changed it, and it's updated everything. It's not, we don't have to undo, change, and then redraw everything, recreate everything. We can just go back in time and change it. And you can also change, it doesn't have to be a feature. So these are features, the extrusions, and these are sketches. Let's say we wanted this circle to be a different diameter. You can either double click it or right click it. and you'll see we get our original sketch. We can double click that dimension, and I'm going to change that to 30. Finish sketch, and now it updates. Our extrusion automatically updates to the changes in the sketch. So we want this hole to go all the way through now. We double click this and it's brought up our original edit feature, and we did it minus 50. Well, we know the length of this, it was 100. We know that's 100, so we can change that to minus 100. Now there is a better way of doing this process, but for now, just bear that in mind. So we did minus 100. So you can go back and you can change everything about this. Okay, so we've got this basic shape here, and it is very basic, but I just want to show you some different ways of achieving what we've done here, which make things a bit easier to use, especially when it comes to editing later on. If you remember when we did this extrusion here, and I'll right click edit feature, we worked out the length of this, which was 100 millimeters, so we just said minus 100 millimeters. And if I put it back to minus 50, it's only going halfway again, okay? But if you go into an actual face, in this case, because we wanted it to go all the way, it was going from this face to this face here. When we put it as minus 100 millimeters, that worked, but if we then went back in our history and changed the length of this actual object to 150 millimeters, this extrusion would still be telling it to go back to minus 100. So then we'd have to have another process to update. We'd have to update something else. In Fusion, what you're trying to do is make everything tie together all the time. So a better way of doing it would be, instead of typing a distance, this is telling us what it's going to ask for. In the usual case, what we've been doing, we've been giving it a distance of minus 50, minus 100, whatever. But you can change this and say, I want the extrusion to go to an object, and then you'll see it's highlighting select, so it wants us to select where. Well, we want the extrusion to go from this face to this face. And if we do it that way, we'll get the same output, but now Fusion, whatever this length ends up being, and I can change that in the original sketch. If I then change this to 150, you'll see that extrusion still goes to the end because we've told it to go from that face to that face. So no matter what this length changes to, it's always going to do that. Whereas at minus 100, it would have stopped 50 millimeters short. So you're always kind of getting in this mindset, and yeah, this is a quick beginner's course, but it's good to try and get that mindset from the start of how might this change and how can I make that process easier. Okay, so let's just make this a little bit more complex. If you're going to make this object, let's say we were making it out of metal or something, you wouldn't have all these kind of right angles and things like that. So what we can do, we can use these commands here. Under modify, these commands let us modify, as the name says, existing geometry. And one thing you can use here, you can use fillets and chamfers. So a fillet will put kind of a rounded edge on something, and a chamfer will put, well, a chamfered edge, believe it or not. So let's try fillet. It's going to ask us just for some edges. So if we select these two edges here, now it's going to ask us for a radius. If we go 5 millimeters, you can see it's put this kind of nice filleted corner on, which you get if you were cutting this with a kind of mill or something like that. That's probably how it would end up looking. And that same process, this is an inside corner. You can use it on outside edges too. So let's just do those two, and let's go 5 again. Okay. And there we've got those edges. And you could even use it. Well, let's do a chamfer this time, which works exactly the same way, but I'm going to chamfer the bottom edge. Oops. I'm going to deselect that. I'm going to chamfer this bottom edge all the way around. And it's going to be an equal distance chamfer, so you could tell it to, if it wasn't 45 degree, equal distance basically means 45 degrees, think of it that way. Or you could have different angles, different distances. We'll keep it simple. Let's go with 10 millimeters. Okay. So now it's got a bit of a chamfer there. Okay, I don't really know what, it's starting to look a bit like a gun, but I don't know what this object is. I'm going to imagine now, because it's got this flat face, it's going to be mounted on something. So we'd need some mounting holes on here. Now again, to do that we're going to go to Sketch, and you could draw circles, which you may be thinking of now. I'm just going to draw some circles, extrude them, that's my mounting holes. Well, in Fusion, if you're going to do holes that are going to be used for something like, you do have a hole command, which it's good to use because you get a lot more functionality, and I'll show you that now. So first we just want to position the center points of these holes, and we can do that by just using these points here. So I'm going to just roughly put them on. We'd probably have, let's say we'd have one there, and you can see what Fusion does when you create these points, you get these extended lines where it's basically saying line these things up. When you get a line like that, it'll be lining them up together. Okay, so let's just do that, and then to position these, and again remember these, there's nothing actually here, this is just a point, it's kind of a setting out point. I'm going to do some, under create, I'm going to go to sketch dimension, I'm going to lay them out with some dimensions. So we click the point and we click the edge, okay, and let's go with 12, and you might notice both of these moved, okay, because when we drew them, remember we've got those extended lines, it aligned them up with each other. If I show you that again, on here, if I go 12, only that one will move, but on here, if I select those 2 points and type in 12, both of these moved because again it's aligned. Now we're still missing some geometry. I'm going to go 12 from here, I'm going to go 12 from here, and 12 from there. And now these are fully constrained. You see this one, so this one has 2 dimensions from each edge. This one has no dimensions, but it's still constrained because we've told it it's in line with that one, which is at 12, and it's in line with that one, which is at 12. So you can cut down on the number of dimensions you have. And what these alignments, it kind of put them on automatically, but they're called constraints. And if you ever want to view them or edit them, you get these little symbols here. And if you highlight one, you might notice it highlights this one too. It's hard to see, but the items that are constrained together, their constraint symbol will highlight when you select the other one, if that makes sense. And if we wanted to get rid of that, we could just right click it and click delete, okay? But those constraints are based up here. This is a constraints tool. So if you just wanted to add them without it doing it automatically with those dash lines, you can add more constraints. So let's just, for now, just as a demonstration, I'm just going to put a point on. I'm not going to let it do anything automatically. I'm just going to put a point on there. You can see this constraint symbol, it's this symbol here, okay? And if you hover over something, you'll see what it's asking you to do. And you'll get used to what these constraints mean. Some of them are self-explanatory. That's horizontal, vertical alignment. If you hover over it a bit longer, you'll get a bit more of a description of what it does, but most of them are self-explanatory. If not, you can play about and work them out. But if we go with a horizontal, vertical alignment, if we select 2 points, okay, you'll see now it's put the constraint on and it's aligned it. So these constraints are really good. A lot of people don't use these. You'll see sketches full of dimensions and unnecessary dimensions. Get used to using constraints if you can, because it'll make your job a whole lot easier. Okay, so let's delete that constraint and delete that point. But yeah, there's all sorts of constraints in here for different right angles, having things aligned. It makes things easy, as I said. So let's finish that. And now we've got these points. Again, there's no actual geometry here. They're just setting out points. But if we go to either this one here, hole, or under create, we can pull that down, go to hole. Then you'll see it's going to ask where do you want your holes. And one of the options is face and sketch points. This is the face, these are the sketch points. So we can just select these now. And bear in mind, it kind of defaults to the last ones used or whatever. It probably is not going to look right. It's certainly not going to be what you want, but it might look something like this, which is just crazy. It's just because if you look here, these are the dimensions you can input. So you've got the diameter of the hole and the depth of the hole. The diameter is set to 50 millimeters, so it's going to be more like 5 millimeters. And for the depth, we don't want it to go all the way through. I'm going to say, let's go with 20. Okay. And then, this is the reason I said, up until now, you could have done the same thing with a cylinder and extrude it, but here we get the other options. So we can have a simple hole, counterbored hole, countersunk hole. So simple hole is just, it's a drilled hole at that point. A counterbore, it puts this bore in here. If I make, you see as you change these, you get more options here. So if I was to make that 8, you'll see you kind of get a, let's make that 5, like a recess for something like a capped head on a screw. So you've probably seen those. You can also have a countersink. It's a bit bigger. So if you're going to have a screw and you want the head to sit flush, you can have a countersink. You can also have a clearance hole, a tapped hole, okay, a taper tapped. So if you put tapped, you can now have a thread, and it will come up and it will give you all the options for the threads. In this case, as usual, Fusion takes a good guess, so it's a metric, it's an M5 screw. Okay, threaded hole, which we probably want here. Yeah, we don't want a flat bottom. You can flat bottom or angle. That's probably what we want. So I'm going to OK that. And now we've got some threaded holes. So this piece would actually be able to be bolted onto the side of something. Okay, and some bolts will come for another object or a plate and allow you to fix that. That's what I'm imagining. Again, it's a completely made up part. But you can see that that might actually be a part of something that you'd want to create. And we've created it so simple. Even with this course, with me talking, it's not taken that long. It would take a matter of minutes once you know what you're doing. So there's loads of commands in here. Again, for this course, we're trying to get through quickly. We're not going to go through most of them, but I do want to show you something. I'm going to show you now, we're going to look at the difference between components and bodies and that kind of thing, and how you can create multi-part objects. So let's just imagine a plate is going on here, and we're going to create that plate now. Well, what would be the best way to do that? What we need to do, we need to know the difference between components here. So we want this design file to be our full assembly, and it contains more than one component. This being one component, and we're going to create a plate which will fit on there, which will be another component. The problem is in our document here, and if you go to the left, you can see we've got a list of all the items in. So we've got our origins, we've got a body, we've got one body, which is this, and we've got a few sketches, so you can see them all listed here. But it all comes under this kind of one component. We haven't even saved it yet. So first thing I want to do is I want to save this as, I'm just going to call it assembly 1. And if I press enter, now we've got our component saved as assembly 1, but this is our whole object. It's just one component. If I right click that, and I can say new component, and I'm going to call this plate, then now we get a new component here, and if we start working in that, you'll see it's got a dot next to it in that circle, and our other component, which is this one, has gone kind of transparent. You can see for it. That means we're working on this one. We're now working on this component here. What I really want is for both these components to be separate in one assembly file. Well, the best way to do that is always start by making a new component. But in this case, all we need to do is we're going to go to that body, and we're going to go create components from bodies. And now it makes this component here, which I can right click and call, I'm just going to call it, let's call it main piece, whatever. So now we've changed a bit. We can go up here and we can select our assembly, and that'll select everything. Or we can select main piece, which is this one, or we can select plate, which is this one. Now, the only thing with that is our sketches here should actually really be under there. And that's why it's the best thing to do is get into the habit. When you start a new project, and I'll show you now. If I go to New Design, first thing you want to do is save it as whatever, and then you'll get a name for your whole project. And then the next thing you want to do is New Component, and keep however many components you've got, just keep creating those. Okay, so that would be 1, 2, and you just keep creating new components, and then your sketches will be nicely inside your components, as long as when you're working on something you make it the current one by clicking that dot. Then that is how you want to start. But I wanted to wait until we'd done something to show you why that's a good habit to get into, because otherwise you've got to kind of go back and move things about. So again, probably outside the scope of this course, but it's a good habit to get into. When you start a project, just create your components. But we'll carry on with this one. So we're going to do this plate now. And what I could do is I could go back, work out the dimensions, our extrusions, our sketches, and try and create a plate the same size. But we don't need to in Fusion. We've already got it here, so we can use existing geometry where we can. All we need to do, make sure our plate is active. So we're in our new piece. We'll go create a sketch, and I'll select that face. You can select the face even though it's not the active part. And now you'll see it actually highlights. So we can get that geometry in. We can select it. So under Create, we have this option here, Project Include. If we go to Project and we select that there, you can select individual lines if you want, but we're just going to select all that and click OK. It actually projects that geometry into our sketch. Okay, so now we can finish sketch and we can extrude, we can use that. Now, for the sake of this, we're just going to extrude it as it is. It's cut these holes out already. I probably wouldn't do it that way if it was an actual design that could change in future. It will update as these holes update because it's used for projection, but it's not very good practice. But I'm going to do it this way just for now because it's just a quick course. So I'm going to extrude that, and let's go, it'll be a 12mm plate. And there we are. So now we have a plate that can fix on there. And you'll see we don't actually get, if we wanted to make these into kind of pocket screws, because they're not holes, it's just part of the extrusion, we don't get that option. We'd have to do it somehow with we could do a new sketch and do some new extrusions on top, but it's not a very tidy way of doing it. So I'm going to go back to this feature, and I'm going to select the inside of the circles too, which will fill that in. And I'm going to go OK. So now we just have a flat plate. But we can do another sketch on here. We can go to Project. And what we might have to do is actually turn off. You can turn off visibility by clicking the eye. So I'm going to turn off the body that I'm working on, which will allow me to select these points. I'm going to project those, finish sketch, turn our body back on. You can see we've got these points we've just projected, so we can go to Hole, and we can select these points now. And for this distance, again we get this option going, instead of distance we can say 2. So if I hide the first piece, I can say, oh, I just want to go to this face. So we told it our holes are going all the way through, and this time they're going to be, let's go with counterbored holes. It's a 12mm plate. In fact, let's go countersunk, but we don't want threads on these ones. Those would be simple holes. So these are just simple holes counterbored. So your screw would sit in there flush, and it would go straight through kind of that hole and screw into this object here. So if we go back to our full assembly, you can see now we've got a plate and a piece that will fix together. And what I want to do, I want to give these a material just to make them look more realistic. So I want to select the whole body. We can select the body in here, like that, or we can just click it. You'll see I'm trying to select the whole thing, but it's only selecting faces. So Fusion, you can tell it what to select, and it's under this select option here, believe it or not. So we want to go selection priority. So that is what is the top priority when we click on it. At the moment it's selecting faces. We want to go on body or component. In this case it doesn't matter. I'm going to say component. So now when you click it, it will select the whole component. Under modify, we've got physical material and we've got appearance. So physical material will apply all sorts of properties. Fusion knows about materials. You can input strengths, you can create your own materials. If you're working in an engineering department, you probably put in material properties so then it can work out where weaknesses are, things like that. If you just want it to look realistic, you can just go to appearance. It's up to you really. I'm just going to go to appearance. We're not doing any kind of simulation in this course, but it's going to be, this is going to be, let's say this is a kind of a plastic. Yeah, let's go with ABS white. So what you do is you drag it onto your object and you'll see it selects it there. And I'm going to go to metal and I'm going to go to, let's make this other one a polished brass, okay? There we go. And close that. So now we've got two objects, different materials that can be attached together. And this is how you build up assemblies. See? So we've got our assembly and we've got our two components. And you just keep adding things. You can add your screws, all sorts of stuff like that. If you want to add screws and bolts, it's probably outside the scope of this course, but there is an option here. If you go insert, you can insert these supplier parts. Yeah, MacMaster cart, there's all sorts of screws, but you don't have to model screws, nuts, bolts, that kind of thing. They're all in there. You can have a play about with that, okay? But we're not going to get through that here. So that's it. So one other thing I want to go for is patterns. So let's imagine around this hole we wanted a series of holes around there. So let's do a sketch on this face. I'm going to do a center point circle. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get the diameter, get the center point of a circle to show up by clicking on either the center or clicking on the edge. And you can see you can snap to the center, and without clicking I'm going to drag up. Okay, so this is in line with the center, and I'm going to do a hole which is 5 millimeters. Okay, now I want to click on this sketch piece. It's not letting me. Why is that? Well, let's go back under select, and you've got these filters here. At the moment, remember we told it our priority was component, so it's not going to let us, it's going to want to select the whole component, even in sketch mode. Well, if that happens, go to selection filters, and you can go down, you can say, well, I want to be able to click on sketch geometry, or sketch points, or sketch profiles. Sometimes it's easier just to go select all. You can select everything, okay? So if ever you can't click on something, it's not really letting you click it, go under that select filters, either work out what it is you want to click on or just click on select all, okay? Sometimes if it's selecting an object and your object is behind it, that can be useful to select individual items. Generally I just click select all. But now we can select this circle here, and I want to do a pattern of circles all the way around. Well, you're not going to draw those and work out the angles and everything. All we're going to do, we're going to go create, and under here you got circular pattern. Okay, so it's asking us now objects. I want to do that, and where is the center point? Again, get it on this circle. Center point is there, and you can see now it's filled in what it thinks we might want to do, and it's given us a quantity. So we've got 3. So 1, 2, 3, and it's going all the way around full. So it's doing 360 basically. Well, that's okay, but I want 12 of them. There we go. And maybe you didn't want it a full 360, you just wanted it 180. You see, you've still got 12. Now you can use these arrows to drag it round, but in these cases it's usually better to just type it in. So I want a full 360 and I want 12 of these holes. And I'll click OK, and that's an easy way to do the pattern. And now you could finish sketch, and this time I am going to use it as an extrusion since it's just going all the way through. to select hole. Select them all, and these are just going to be simple holes, unthreaded, and the distance is going to go to this face. Okay, so that's a circular pattern, and it goes all the way through. And the other pattern we can do, which I'll do, let's just choose on here. This one we wanted more of a grid effect. So again, I'm going to do a circle, and I'm just going to put the first one, this is going to be 5mm, and I'm going to do a dimension from there to the center point. Let's go 12, and from here to the center point 12. And I'm going to finish that. Okay, so this time, in fact, let me right click. I'm going to carry on with this sketch first. I'm going to show you different ways to do this. So this time we're going to do a rectangular pattern. Works similar to a circular pattern. Select your object, and you'll see you've got two directions. You've got this direction, and you've got this direction. So I want, well, let's say 3, and you've got a choice here. It's going to want to know the distance it's going, but is that the distance in full, i.e. the distance between here and here, or is it the space in between each object? You can tell that here. If you want a full distance, you go to extent. If you want the space in between, you click on spacing, and you can change this. So let's go to 12. Okay, so we're working in this direction here. Let's say we want 12 in between, and we want 6 of them. And then in the other direction, we want a distance of, and it'll be minus because we're going down. So minus 12. And I just want 2. And I'm going to click OK. So now we've got a rectangular pattern of holes. And if I finish sketch, I can extrude all those. Oops. If you select the wrong thing, just click it again. And there we go. So that's, you've got a rectangular pattern and you've got a circular pattern. Now, I'm going to delete this extrusion, and under this sketch, you see you've got, this is the icon. If you ever want to change the pattern, you can double click that icon there. Find that. Sometimes you have to find it if you've got a big pattern, but you can find that. And what I'm going to do is, I want to delete that pattern. So I'm going to highlight that. I'm going to go delete. Now it's not going to delete the objects. It's just going to delete the fact that they were linked together with a pattern. So I could have just undone this, but I want to show you. So what I want is, I just want to extrude this single object. Now if I finish sketch, okay, the sketch has gone. The reason the sketch has disappeared is, if we go under sketches, when Fusion uses your sketch for something, we've already extruded it, even though we deleted it, we've created an action on that sketch, it tends to hide it. It thinks, well, you've used that sketch for something, you don't need it anymore. So it hides it. So all you got to do is click the eye and it'll put it back on. Now we've been working in this main assembly. Again, if you were doing this, you'd really want it under your main piece. That doesn't matter. I'm just showing you this pattern. So the other way you could do this is just to extrude one of them, and then those rectangular and circular patterns are also available in the solid modeling menu. So you don't have to do your pattern under your sketch. You see you've got rectangular pattern here. What you can do, you can go under patterns, rectangular pattern, and now it'll say what object do you want. So bodies, well, it's going to select the whole thing. I want feature. An extrusion is a feature. So once you select feature, I can click here to this extrusion and it's selected it. Okay, and now it'll ask for axes. Well, I want that axis there. So you can do the same thing here now. Let's say 2 at 12 and 3 at, I can't remember what it was it? It was 12. Anyway, whatever it was, we can say I want 6. And again, change that to spacing. So I want 6 at 12. So we get the same outcome, but there's two ways of doing it. You can do the pattern in the sketch, or you can do the pattern on the object. Now, which is the best way? Well, it really depends how complex the object is that you're extruding, and how many there are. We did have to go through and select every sketch object to extrude it, which automatically should tell you it's a long way around. So really, it's probably best to do your sketch, extrude that single item, and then do the pattern of the objects. And that way, you're only selecting that extrude once, and you're patterning that. But sometimes it might be better done the other way. It depends on the process. So anyway, I don't know what this object is going to be, but we've gone through some commands here. So I hope you enjoyed that. I hope it gave you at least confidence to get going, get clicking on things, see what we do. You know how the basic process of solid modeling works in Fusion now. If you did want to get more in depth, we do have our complete Fusion course. At the moment, I think that is around 9.5 hours. I'm adding stuff to that all the time. It's constantly being updated and having stuff added to. That really goes in depth of everything that you can do. It goes through all the different modifications and creations. There's parametric modeling, sheet modeling, there's photorealistic visualizations, setting them out on a drawing, we've done it, all sorts. It goes through everything. So if you fancy that, have a look in the description, there'll be a link to that. It's probably one of the lowest priced Fusion courses out there. It also gets lots of reviews. Many thousands and thousands of people have done that. So if you want to check that out, feel free. If not, just carry on clicking, trial and error, and teach yourself that way. If you did get anything at all out of it, I'd appreciate if you give us a like and a subscribe. Comment in the bottom, let me know if there's anything you want us to go over. If you want to do another one of these quick tutorials, go a bit more in depth on some things, let me know in the comments. If there's anything particular you want me to do a quick tutorial video on, let me know in the comments, or just let me know you enjoyed it and say hello. But please do like and consider subscribing. We're going to have loads of stuff on our channel, whether it's 3D printing or just laser cutting or just Fusion and CAD in general. So, yep. Until next time, I'll see you later.